Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. Welcome to our next Dexibit webinar. I'm joined today by Victoria Alogna. Thanks very much for joining, Victoria. Great to have you with us today. And my name is Angie Judge from Dexibit. Today we're talking all about forecasting. And we're going to go into an introduction to forecasting using machine learning, how it's useful to you and your team and your organization, how to create dashboards from forecasts in Dexibit if you're using us, and sort of the different accuracies and definitions and how things work behind the scenes, which we thought would be interesting for everyone. So to get started today, we'll leap straight into things. I'm going to pull up a screen and share with you what Dexibit looks like. So a quick introduction for us. We do data analytics specifically for visitor attractions, be they cultural or commercial, so everything from museums and galleries through to zoos, aquariums, parks, gardens, all the way into commercial attractions like theme parks and stadiums and so forth. And what we do is pull together all sorts of data on the visitor experience. So that might be things like footfall and ticketing, point of sale and CRM, even going through into the digital space, reviews of what visitors are saying online, and combine that with things like weather and what's on in and around the location. And we use all of that to provide you with dashboards and reports, insights and forecasts via software as a service, which is what we're looking at here. So behind the scenes here, all of that data is coming in near real time and provided out with lots of visualizations and a self-service user experience for both data experts, but also people who are completely new to data. So our users are typically anybody from finance and marketing through to operations, visitor services, visitor experience, and so forth. A quick tour around Dexibit. Here we're on our dashboards. You can have lots and lots of dashboards in Dexibit. You can share them if you like with your colleagues. You can turn them into scheduled reports if you want them to go out to email instead of logging in. And in those dashboards, anybody can build as many dashboards as they like with as much data on them from as many sources to tell different data stories and operational dashboards for checking in on things. And today we're going to specifically look at forecasts within that. Here on the left-hand side, you'll see a few modules from us: Insights, Almanac, a data platform with different configurations in it for how your data comes in, and of course a big admin section for managing identity and access management of who can see your data and what they can do with it. Here on the right-hand side, we've got a little auxiliary menu with a couple of other options for doing things with your dashboards, some fantastic fixed and relative date functionality. I know we probably get a little bit more excited about date functionality than your average humans, but some great stuff in here to create all sorts of dimensions for time when you're thinking about your dashboard or different visualizations. And when you're automating out reports, especially with forecasting, that becomes really important because you can say this visualization, as you can see on my dashboard here, looks at next week. This one looks at the month remaining for August. This one's looking at the quarter remaining. Here we've got the year remaining. And down here, I'm looking at retrospectively what happened last week, last month. So every time this report is sending out or this dashboard that I log into, I'm going to be seeing those dates update. And then lastly, here on the right-hand side, you've got a little toolbox, a library of visualizations. So for example, if I wanted to instead look at visitation or ticketing, for example, and I can quickly click to add those into my dashboard, and a studio where I can control what I'm looking at in these specific visualizations, including again things like that date range, or if I'm looking at something like ticketing, I might want to filter that data down to look at particular products and types and channels and such. So it's a really quick guide to Dexibit. But specifically for forecasting, we use machine learning trained on your historic data as much as you can give us, ideally at least a year. We preferably like to go back to 2019, 2017 if we can, for some pre-pandemic history. And we use that data along with our international basis of visitor attractions data and this almanac, a calendar of what's on in and around your location, things like school holidays, public holidays, exhibitions, events, things that are happening around your town or city. And we use all of that information to provide these predictions using machine learning. So what that means is it's much more accurate than trying to do these things by hand or having a guess. It's much faster, of course, than doing any manual analysis. This is an instant prediction that's updating every day. And in addition to that, it provides you with often much more granular predictions than you might be doing manually in-house, where you might be, say, for example, coming up with like a weekly or even monthly visitation projection. This can get you down to daily or even hourly in some cases. And how that is useful is we really think about forecasting on 3 horizons. The first is the annual horizon or long-term horizon. You'll see that for me down here in my visualization, where I'm looking at my forecast for my year remaining. I might be using this to check in with my financial projections, financial plan, big goal setting for the year and things like that. We can go up to a year ahead from the current day at any time. The second horizon is the sort of 90-day horizon, or thinking about things in quarters. And where this again is useful is often when we're thinking about our financial projections and goals, we're doing that on a quarter by quarter basis. So sort of seeing how we've performed so far for the quarter. In this case, we're a month in for July. We've got a couple of months to go. Am I going to hit my goal by quarter end? And the 90-day horizon and that midterm is also really useful for resource hiring. So things like, for example, if I'm going to hire a temporary staff workforce to help me over a busy summer season, sort of planning out when that's going to kick in and how it might ramp up. And then that last horizon is that sort of what's going to happen next week after. And where this can be really useful is for inventory scheduling or resource scheduling, anything from what staff I've got on and how many staff I've got on for different days, right through to, say, for example, how many muffins I might want to stock at my cafe, or how many publications I need in my gift shop. This is really useful for forecast projections. And if you are operating too with third parties, like you've got somebody running your cafe, for example, this is a great one to share with them as well, that they can help with them with their own staff planning too, as well as your own in-house. So those are kind of the 3 horizons that we think about when we think about operationalizing forecasting. So here you've been having a look at my forecasts in Dexibit. So I can create a dashboard of these in the toolbox. If you're creating your own, you're simply coming in here, going into the library, you'd search for forecasting, of course. And here you just click on add, and it's going to add one of these visualizations into your dashboard. And then, so you can see this one has come from me on the end here. And then I'm going to look at a particular date range. So I might want to use that relative date function, and I'm going to look at the previous quarter, for example. I'm interested in how my forecast performed. Now, when I look at forecasts in the past, I really like to have line charts, because I find that they really, as you can see, it's a lot easier to sort of compare forecast versus actual in the past. I can, of course, adjust my titles and such and other sort of styling effects on my graph. And if I'm working with multiple locations, I could at this point choose various locations to work with here. Here I'm looking at my default location up here, which is the Museum of Antarctica, our fake museum that we work with here for forecasting. Any one of our visualizations in Dexibit, you can expand it so that's full width if that's part of your dashboard design. You can swivel it so that you've got a bit of an explainer text coming through to help you understand what you're looking at. And if you're designing dashboards to share with your team, you can change those as well if you want to sort of get into a lot more detail about the context that you're sharing with your team there. And lastly, before I hand over to Victoria to get into the details, you'll see here I've also got on this dashboard here my goals versus my forecast. Now, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about the difference between the two. The thing with machine learning when it comes to forecasting is that they update all the time. So they're changing over the course of the year. They're fluctuating based on what they've seen recently and what's coming up and what might have changed. And so in comparison to sort of financial planning and goal setting that happens as part of an organization's rhythm, where you might do, say, for example, goals that are set at the beginning of the financial year, you usually commit those to plan and they don't really change that much over the course of the year. So in Dexibit, you've got the facility to manage both side by side and compare them to actuals. Your goal or your plans of where you started your year or your quarter or whatever it might be out that are rigid and static. And then your forecasts, which are using machine learning and fluctuating all the time. And the two together are really effective because you can then see, hey, I'm partway through this year, partway through this quarter, partway through this month, whatever it might be. Am I on track to hit those goals? Do I need to replan, adjust, make any changes in what I'm thinking about here? And so managing the two side by side is a really effective way of performance management and planning and tracking and monitoring, which I really like. And sitting behind these, of course, is a bit of a process when you are leading up to those planning periods, like at the beginning of your financial year or in the lead up to it, that you can go into Dexibit, grab a forecast. So I'll come into my forecasting visualization and just hit to expand it out there. I can download that to a CSV if I want to go and work on it in Excel, maybe make some adjustments on things that I might know that the machine learning model might not. Maybe I want to stretch some of it up for my goals for my team. And then you can upload those again as a goal so that you've got those two things side by side, that machine learning forecast and that goal or plan or a variety of those things that you're tracking each horizon for. So with that, I will hand over to Victoria, who's going to talk us through sort of how things work behind the scenes and what our models are all about.
Sounds good. Thanks, Angie. So Dexibit's forecasting models use machine learning. We build these with years of industry research and testing, and we serve the largest and most diverse portfolio of visitor attractions in the world of data. So our models vary between and within a venue, but generally they're trained using whatever works. So that can be unified industry data, that can be your data, experimenting with various training periods for PIT, potentially custom features, and of course your almanac, which includes what's in and around your location, such as free days, exhibitions, events, public holidays, school terms. We use open hours and ticket pricing, weather in some cases for short time horizons. And we usually train multiple models, selecting the best performing candidate or even different models for different time horizons. So that's just a bit about how our forecasting works. We measure accuracy using one primary metric, which is absolute percentage error. So in Dexibit, you can inspect any forecast time period for a variety of accuracy measures. And we also provide a model error to both past and future timeframes, a holistic measure of the model in general, we could say. So absolute percentage error is assessing the accuracy of a given day, week, or month. Generally, we take the actual visitation for that time frame, subtract it by the forecasted visitation for that time frame, and then we divide that by the actual, times it by 100, and you've got your absolute percentage error. Our MAPE score is our mean absolute percentage error, and that is simply the average over a period of time. So we take the average of all APE in a set, and that's what gives you what is known as the MAPE. We also use weighted APE or provide it. This is helpful in cases where you you have a quiet day where visitation is low, because error in these low visitation numbers can have a disproportionate effect on your MAPE value. As an example, if you only have 40 visitors and you're off by 20, you're only 50% accurate. But if you had 120 visitors and you were off by 20, that accuracy looks a little bit better. And we just want to account for that. There are other ways to account for it, but we've chosen this way because it is easiest to understand for our customers. Yeah, that's about it. Are there any questions?
Wonderful. Thanks for that guide, Victoria. And I know accuracy is such a rabbit hole of detail and nuance. So I really appreciate having those sort of multiple equations to be able to use for different accuracy definitions to really understand it, because I think what we're trying to achieve with accuracy usually is building trust and confidence for people who are relying on forecasts, and for them also maybe also understanding like what their contingencies are that they're working with when they're thinking about the future. So I know one of the questions that we get asked all the time is, how often do these models update?
Great question. So 98% of our models update daily. We do have a few models that update weekly. Generally, this depends on our feature sets and what we've determined is most accurate or makes the most sense. So if we have changes in daily features, then we might do it daily versus weekly.
Awesome, thank you. You learn something new every day, don't you? And a question that's come in here. I've heard this one before as well. Can models predict, I'm paraphrasing here, can models predict things they haven't seen?
From a machine learning perspective, no, they can't. So machines are more accurate than humans at remembering events and predicting future events, but they can't forecast what they haven't seen. They require large amounts of data to train on before they can accurately forecast a predictable future, i.e. a future that looks like the past. For instance, recently one of our venues had an exhibition dedicated to a very famous pop star. Their visitation went up 96% of what it had ever been in our training set, at least. And we couldn't predict this because we had no precedent for it. Now that we have it, we'll be able to predict things like it in the future, but we couldn't predict it because we had no precedent for it. Yeah.
And that's the same, I imagine, for things like ticket pricing changes to a degree, if the price is being increased to a new level that it's never been at before.
Absolutely. We can leverage our unified data that we have access to, but generally you're more confident with things you have more data for. I guess is another way you can make use of these accuracy metrics. We are more accurate at different times of the year during different periods than we are at others. And it's helpful to know when we're, 98% accurate versus 92.
And speaking of things that we haven't seen before, the probable exception to the rule there that we could add in would be new locations that are opening for the first time, because that's again when you would rely on that unified model of all industry data to look for similar locations, segments, sizes, and other new venues that have opened to make those initial predictions. Absolutely.
We can leverage our data to make more or less accurate predictions about what your visitation will look like, especially when we have good metadata. We can make better predictions.
And that's really good too when those new locations open, that then the machine learning models start learning off actuals quite quickly. So it provides a really nice seamless transition from sort of pre-opening planning into opening and then into business as usual phases too.
Yeah, one of the ways we do that, one of the ways we do assess our accuracy for some of our models is how well does this predict on a venue whose visitation it's never seen before, and that's an important metric that we look at. So,
very cool. And one last question I've got here: what else can you predict?
Basically,
other than visitation, I presume that is.
We can predict anything for which we have good data for. And that could be revenue by line of business. That could be tickets by ticketing line. That could be attrition. We can simulate the impact of things such as exhibitions or events, and things like membership churn.
I know exhibition simulation is a really popular topic. So for those out there that are doing that, or event simulation, that can be from the first pass of like which exhibition or event are we choosing between multiple, and then once you've sort of settled on one, maybe looking at different variations of ticket price or advertising spend, or even shaping the sort of product of the exhibition or event itself, like if it's aimed at sort of art or history or multi-artist versus single artist shows and things like that. So sort of tweaking the positioning of something, right down to sort of adjusting that schedule of how long and when will the exhibition fall. And where this is really useful is really just maximizing the visitation and, if it's applicable, revenue impact of these exhibitions and events, to make sure that as many people get through and enjoy them as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a hint for collecting data on this stuff. It really helps if you're consistent over time. We see this in longitudinal studies as well, where it's okay if you change the scale from 1 to 7 versus 1 to 10. That's something that's pretty easy to rescale, but it's a lot harder when you change the measure completely. So consistency sometimes matters more than precision.
So some of that metadata that's used for simulating exhibition events is things like the ad spend, where in the location it is, if that matters, and then a couple of things that Victoria's referring to, of things like the tags of the exhibition of events. So say, for example, is it art, history, science? Is it for art, modern or fine? Is it single artist or multi-artist? So you might have multiple tags. Is it Asian arts versus European arts, etc. And then sort of getting into things of resonance, like what's the popularity value of this exhibition? And you might get that through market research, focus groups, or even things like Wikipedia or Google search term, anything that you can do to kind of quantify how popular something might be. And that's the scales in particular, right? That if you change your mode of measuring something and you've gone from market research to a focus group and change your question and the scale and things, it gets hard to compare apples with apples on that resonance score. But not to worry if you haven't got them. There's always things like Wikipedia and Google terms to go back and or retrospective market research to go back and apply that to your history of exhibitions or events.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, I think that might be us for today. Anything else that we haven't covered, Victoria?
No, this seems good to me.
Cool. Well, thank you to everybody out there who has joined or is listening to this on a playback. If you do want to talk to us about your forecasting, you can chat with us on our website. In the bottom right-hand corner, you'll find a little chat, or email us at info@dexibit.com, or reach out to us on social, and we look forward to hearing from you.